I shook my head in disbelief. Wait, can you repeat that? My father rolled his eyes. It's not as weird as it seems, Maggie. I put on my socks, covering up the birthmark on my left ankle that was shaped like a heart. I was embarrassed about it while growing up before my father told me that birthmarks were kisses from angels. It made me feel unique and special. He always knew what to say to assuage my anxieties. But now my father was the one who should be anxious. What he was proposing was crazy. Dad, people you haven't seen in 20 years are giving you $25,000 to come to a dinner party. That seems weird because it is. My father slowly got to his feet from the chair in my room and leaned against my dresser. He was out of breath from the movement. He has been in poor health lately, especially since my mom died last year. My mom, Martha, had helped him during the initial phases of his decline, but since her death my dad hadn't been doing too well. I moved in with him to help out around the house and drive him to his doctor visits, not to mention keeping him company with jokes and stories. It's the least I could do. As his daughter, looking out for him was my duty, and that's why I demanded he skip the dinner party hosted across the country. He grabbed my hand and the warmth was reminiscent of all the fond memories I had of him. Knowing he was in ill health, at only 58 years old, always made my throat dry and my eyes well with tears. He wouldn't be around forever, and this thought made me upset. Honey, I haven't seen the Remberts in 20 years. Your mother and I were very close with them until we had to move to Florida. We had a tight-knit group of friends in California, and it would be a delight to see them again. The Remberts know the only way to get everyone together is to entice us. With $25,000. My father laughed. Trust me, they can afford it. He grabbed his suitcase and lifted the telescopic handle. Wait until I send you photos of their mansion. You'll understand how rich they are. You don't have to send me photos, I said, and disappeared inside my walk-in closet. Why is that? I emerged with my own luggage in hand. Because I'm coming with you. He refused at first, but I didn't take no for an answer. My father was unhealthy and I wasn't going to let him travel alone. He needed me and I wanted to help. Much to his chagrin, he relented as I purchased a plane ticket from my phone. He grumbled all the way to the airport. Our Uber stopped at a wrought iron gate that spanned the length of a wide driveway entrance. As soon as we approached, a buzz sounded out and the gates opened. Our driver continued. My father's excitement was palpable. He rarely spoke of his time in California, so I was eager to hear tales from his friends. Once the mansion came into view, I realized how correct my father had been. The Remberts were not only wealthy, they were ultra-rich. Their neoclassical mansion was massive and opulent. Lush landscaping turned the area into a beautiful oasis. Money certainly wasn't an issue for them. We exited the car and grabbed our luggage. My father mentioned how the house hadn't changed a bit, and I could only imagine all the wild parties that had happened here decades ago. I glanced at the eaves, wondering if banners hung during ritzy events. I caught sight of a gazebo in the side yard and wondered how many millionaires had conversed there. I was noticing the beautiful wooden front door when I noticed something strange about it. It seemed too thick. Too industrial. Then it opened. A man and a woman appeared on the portico. They were well-dressed and had an air of class about them. They greeted us with wide smiles. Thomas. The men said to my father. So glad to see you after all these years. We've missed that electric personality of yours. And I've missed your hospitality. It's great to see you. The men became somber. We heard about Martha. She was a sweet woman. We offer our condolences. My father nodded. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been tough, but I'm getting through it. And who is your guest? The woman asked. This is my daughter, Maggie. My father put a hand on my shoulder. Maggie, this is Preston and Shay Rembert. Our hosts for the night. The couple regarded one another, then Preston said, Thomas, we didn't know you were bringing a +1. My father gave a half-hearted laugh, understanding the faux pas we'd made. I'm a little less independent now. My health isn't what it used to be since Martha died and Maggie insisted she accompany me. Will this be a problem? The couple looked at each other again, then granted us their big smiles. No problem at all, dear, Shay answered. There is one rule though. What's that? I asked. He held up a small wicker basket. No cell phones at the dinner table. Wow. This really was going to be a posh setting. I looked inside the basket and found several other cell phones. My father and I added ours to the pile. We don't want those pesky notifications ruining our conversation this evening, Preston said and took the basket. Come in, Shay offered. Everyone else is at the dinner table. We have a lot to get to, so let's get started. The splendor of the home's interior was unmatched from anything I'd seen before. The inside of the house was extraordinary, elegant marble flooring, exotic wood used as accents, pricey artwork on every wall, towering ceilings. It was extravagant and made me realize how their $25,000 attendance handout was nothing to them. We turned the corner to find the dining hall. The place erupted in celebration. Everyone who was already seated at the table got to their feet to hug, kiss, and banter with my father, who in turn introduced me. A woman in a designer midi dress hugged me, then kissed my cheek. Her styled gray hair poked my forehead. I'm Wendy. It's a pleasure to meet such a beautiful, young lady, she said, then snickered after she added, you certainly didn't get your father's looks. A pair of men took turns shaking my hand. They were both in Armani suits and had slicked back salt and pepper hair. I'm Anthony, the taller of the two said. And this is my husband, Brendan. Nice to meet your acquaintances, I said. The pleasure is ours, Brendan said, then he kissed the top of my hand. A man donned in a three-piece suit approached me next. His white mustache wiggled as he spoke. I'm Lennox. He hooked my arm in his and led me to the table. Everyone else followed, including my father who hadn't stopped smiling since his friend's greeting. You can sit by me, dear, Lennox said. That way I can tell you all the trouble your old man got into when he was young. My father rolled his eyes and laughed. Oh no. Don't listen to him, Maggie. He's a kook. Everyone was jovial as they found their seats, just in time for the hosts to take their seats. Preston was at the head of the table and Shay was beside him. The table setting was reminiscent of a Michelin-starred restaurant. Luxury tableware sat in front of each guest. Crystal glasses sparkled from an overhead chandelier. 2 windows flooded the area with natural light, which was supplemented by wall sconces. Everything was so lavish. The opposite side of the room was grand as well. Blocks of granite stone formed a vast fireplace. However, there was no fire. The pit was charred from use long ago, but with modern heating systems it made sense the fireplace was mostly cosmetic now. Still, it gave a sense of friendly warmth to the area. Wendy held up a glass. Do tell one of your servers to hurry with the wine. My tongue is dry. I doubt that, Lennox quipped, gaining a laugh from everyone except the hosts. Anthony pointed to my father. No alcohol for old Thomas. We know how wild he can get once a buzz settles in his gut. My father blushed but came back with a retort. And how many times did I catch you and Brendan making out after a few cocktails? Brendan laughed and put a hand on his husband's thigh. Don't put any ideas into our heads or this party might turn nostalgic. Everyone laughed again. Except the hosts. Preston Rembert stood up and the conversation stopped. It was clear that something serious was on his mind. His demeanor was in stark contrast to the high spirits of his guests. My dear friends, Shay and I have invited you here for a very special occasion. The most consequential occasion of your lives. And of ours. I looked at my father and his smile was radiant. Preston continued. Our friendship with each of you has impacted our lives in many ways. Most positive. He looked down at the table. Some negative. Shay looked at her smartwatch. She held up 2 fingers to her husband. How odd. Your memories of this occasion may have been lost with time, but today marks the 20th anniversary of the disappearance of our dear Madeline when she was only 2 years old. Your sympathy and assistance during that first year helped Shay and I keep our sanity. We would like to say thank you. Shay held up 1 finger to her husband, like some kind of countdown. However, since that time the police have never found our child. The night of her disappearance we hosted a party, in which all of you attended. The police say she walked out of our home during the party and fell into the river located behind our backyard. All evidence pointed to the river as the culprit. She's dead. Shay and I have processed that fact. He sniffled lightly. But all of you were in attendance to that party. 20 years ago you were questioned by police and let go. The police reports say that none of you saw Madeline. Shay then stood up. Over the last year we conducted our own extensive investigation and have come to one conclusion. This is why we invited you to our home. Preston groped under the table, then produced a shotgun. We believe the police reports were wrong. Shay checked her smartwatch again, then said coldly, "Someone here took our Madeline and killed her. Tonight, we are going to find out who." Then Shay pressed a button on her watch. The house began to rumble. Metallic whines resonated throughout the house. Tableware trembled and clinked. The dining hall began to darken. Metal panels slid from casings inside the windows until the glass was completely covered. My view of the foyer produced a sight of thick steel skating down to cover the beautiful wooden front door. The house became dark as every window and door was covered by an inch of steel. Only the sconces provided light. Preston engaged the pump action of the shotgun and loaded a round into the chamber. "No one leaves until we learn who took our daughter and why they killed her." Lennox, Anthony, and Brendan cackled with laughter at the situation. Ostensibly, this was a dark attempt at humor, they thought. Wendy seemed more confused than amused. My father, on the other hand, looked panicked. He realized this was no attempt at humor. There was a seriousness to Preston's threats. Lennox tightened his tie and approached his old friend Preston. He gave him a hard slap on the back. "Old age hasn't deteriorated your funny bone, Press. If this is the appetizer, I can't wait to get to the entree dash." The shotgun erupted. Lennox fell back and a cloud of red mist followed. The man slammed against the antique hardwood floor, clutching the moist hole in his stomach before going limp. Wendy fell out of her chair, and as she screamed, Lennox's blood that peppered her face dropped onto her designer dress. Anthony and Brendan grabbed one another and dashed out of the dining hall to hide, their howls of terror echoing up to the chandelier. I was frozen in place, unable to comprehend the murder I just witnessed. My chest thumped from my racing heartbeat and my skin turned numb until I felt a warm hand on my arm. "Maggie. Let's go," my father shouted. I grabbed my father's arm and we hurried toward the grand foyer. Meanwhile, Wendy sat on the ground, weeping and begging for the Rembrandts to say this was all a sick, twisted joke. "This is no joke," Shay screamed and grabbed one of the steak knives from the table. "We want answers. We deserve to know who killed our child." She slashed at Wendy's outstretched hand. Wendy groaned in pain. "I didn't do anything to Madeline. None of us did. You've both gone insane." Shay slashed again, slicing off one of Wendy's fingers. "We went insane with grief decades ago. If we die tonight, then so be it. We will die knowing that our child's murder has been avenged." My father and I made it to the front door. I grabbed the lip of the steel panel, but even when I used all my strength it didn't budge. My father tried too, but his attempt was unsuccessful as well. From where I stood, I could see parts of other rooms, a library and a living room. Every door that led outside, every window, every exit was covered by steel. We were completely trapped inside this house. We heard Wendy scream again. "Think, Dad," I said. "You've been in this house before. Where can we hide?" His eyes flitted back and forth before rising to the stop of a staircase. "Follow me." My father's ascent was anything but quick. He held onto the staircase rail with one hand and my shoulder with the other. When we got to the landing, we were halfway to the second floor. We heard Wendy shout, "She probably drowned in the river just like the cops said," before a shotgun blast silenced her. "We have to hurry," I told my father. He nodded, but his breaths were shallow and weak. Still, he hurried the best he could for my sake. He knew he had to protect me from this psycho couple. His love and courage knew no bounds. He was going to protect me no matter what. We had to hide. We had to survive. When our shoes touched the second floor hallway, I heard Preston shouting from the grand foyer. "Anthony. Brendan. Thomas. All we want is the truth." My father grabbed my face and stared into my eyes. "Maggie, they've completely lost their minds. I'm so sorry I let you come with me. I'm a terrible father. Dad, I'm the one who decided to come. Me. It's not your fault. I'm so sorry, honey. Tears formed in his eyes and he hugged me. We trembled together from our shared distress. Dad, apologies can wait. Do you remember anything about this house? We have to hide. The staircase creaked with approaching footfalls. Preston and Shay were getting close. My father composed himself and his eyes began to dart around while he thought. Then he pointed down the hallway. The second guest bedroom on the right. Hurry. The Remberts' plan was going as expected. They had expected their guests to hide in their massive mansion while they killed and interrogated each one to learn what they wanted. I knew this because every single door in the hallway had been left wide open. Not only that, but every door had a block of wood nailed in front of it to prevent it from closing. No one could barricade themselves in a room. No one could escape their wrath. Their evil revenge plot has been planned meticulously. My father and I slipped into the guest room he identified. Thank God, it's still here, he said, and he pulled me to the corner next to an antique folding screen, a partition seen in old movies behind which women would change clothes. We crouched behind it and remained as silent as possible. The silence didn't last long. Shay stomped into the room and her deep inhalation sounded like a predatory beast on the prowl for prey. I stared at the flowery designs of the antique folding screen, willing her to leave. Fear shrouded every emotion. My knees trembled with dread. I felt so stupid for giving up my cell phone when we first arrived. I felt so stupid for not pushing harder for my father to skip this friendly dinner party. Now the $25,000 handout made much more sense. My father was correct, it was a way to entice their friends to show up, only the Remberts used it as bait. A shrill noise sliced its way through the room when Shay let the blade of her knife skip on the old wooden walls of the guest room. Is anyone in here? She whispered erratically. If your lips won't let you confess, then maybe my knife will do the trick. I heard her get to her knees and search under the bed. I heard the closet door open before she slashed madly at empty clothes. There is no way out, my dear friends. We planned this for a year. All exits are closed. Our house is a prison, your prison. Show yourselves and tell us the truth. Then her footsteps were coming to the folding screen. The volume of her frantic breathing grew louder and louder and louder. A hand grabbed onto the top of the folding screen and I clenched my fist. I wasn't going down without a fight. The shotgun discharged again, this time from down the long hallway. Someone laughed. Then someone screamed. You killed him. You killed my Anthony. The hand on the partition disappeared and Shay ran toward the source of the screaming. My father and I took a collective breath and came out from the security of the partition. We had to change hideouts while the Remberts' attention was elsewhere. We padded into the hallway and started our trek back toward the staircase. In one of the rooms at the far end of the hall we heard Brendan roaring with indignation. You killed my husband. How could you do this, Preston? We are your friends. We trusted you. A metallic click of the shotgun being pumped chimed. And we trusted all of you, but one of you betrayed us. Now all of you will suffer unless the perpetrator confesses. We did nothing wrong. We loved you and your family. Shay and I decided we will go to our graves tonight to find out the truth. And if we bring everyone with us, then so be it. A gunshot ripped through the hallway as my father and I descended the staircase. The Remberts had killed another one of their friends. The house was completely closed. We were trapped like rats in a maze. No, we were trapped like rats in a maze that also contained 2 snakes. We were prey to the Remberts and it was clear to me that no matter how hard someone begged or told the truth, the insane couple was going to kill them. They'd made up their minds already to perform this barbaric slaughter. Once again, my father took his time on the stairs. I wanted to pick him up and carry him so we had more time to hide, but he was a large man and I couldn't do it. We were almost to the landing when he tripped. He landed hard on his leg. His scream of pain was terrible, but it paled in comparison to the crack I heard. His leg was bent at an irregular angle. He crawled to the next step but halted his progress from the pain radiating from his broken bone. I fell down next to my father. Tears poured out while I pleaded and willed him to get up. To keep fighting. I wasn't going to lose my father. Not like this. He put his hand on my face, wiping away tears with his thumb. Maggie, you have to hide. I can bite you sometime. I shook my head ferociously. Absolutely not. I'm not leaving you. Maggie. Maggie, look at me. I did. It's okay. If this is the end for me, then I'm okay with that. I'm ready to see your mother again. My sobbing refused to stop until he grabbed me and held me tightly. The warmth was reminiscent of all the fond memories I had of him. He held me like he knew this would be the last time I would ever see him. I love you, Maggie, he told me. Go hide. I'll hold them off as long as possible. I'm scared, Dad. You'll be okay. He touched my ankle. The place where my heart-shaped birthmark was. You were kissed by an angel, remember? Your angel will protect you. My father pushed me away. Run, he said. Run and hide. My heart told me to stay. To protect my father, even if it cost me my life. But my brain told me to run. To not let his sacrifice be in vain. He was a protector. He was willing to risk his life for his daughter. I did as my protector wanted and ran down the stairs and into the dining hall. I had to find a place to hide. Under the table. No, it was too visible. Behind a china cabinet. No, they would see my feet. Should I grab a knife and defend myself? A knife isn't much against a shotgun. Then I spotted the fireplace. I crouched in the fireplace pit and used an old andiron to lift myself up into the cavity of the chimney. The granite blocks in the chimney allowed handholds, so I hoisted myself up and out of sight. Then I saw moonlight above. An exit. The Remberts didn't think to close off the chimney. This was my only opportunity. I strained my leg muscles to coordinate with my arms to lift myself higher. 4 feet above the ground. 5 feet above the ground. Then there was an obstacle. Something hindered my progress. But I stopped when I heard my father's voice. Why are you doing this? He said from his position on the staircase landing. His voice was so far away it was barely above a whisper to me. We decided that our acceptance of Madeline's death is not enough, Shay answered. We wanted answers. We pored over every possible explanation that night and our conclusion was simple. Someone at our party killed our daughter. Everyone is dead now. Isn't that enough for you? He asked. Not everyone, Preston said and pumped the shotgun again. Are you going to confess, Thomas? Did you kill our Madeline? I would never kill a child. My father screamed. None of us would. He was biding time, just like he said. I used leverage to ascend higher, toward the heavenly pale glow of freedom above. But there was something in the way. A grate. Had the Remberts installed a steel grate so no one could escape? Shay and I knew that this was a possibility, I heard Preston explain. We predicted that none of you would confess before the night was over. 20 years of lies can instill determination in people. So, we agreed that this was a satisfactory conclusion. We know that one of you murdered Madeline, and if we have to kill all of you to kill the one responsible, then so be it. Think of Madeline, my father said. Would she want you doing this? Shay spoke in a cold tone. If Madeline was here, then we would ask her. But she's not, Preston said. Then Preston shot my father. My entire body seized from the loud blast. I almost fell out of the chimney from the heartbreak of knowing my father was dead. I'd never get to hear his voice again. Never feel the warmth of his embrace again. I was a sobbing mess. But I continued up the chimney, pressing against the obstacle hidden in the darkness. I continued even when I heard the Remberts arrive into the dining hall. I wasn't their friend and had no idea who killed their daughter, but I knew they wouldn't leave me alive. I had to escape my captivity or I would die. We can hear you, dear, Shay announced into the fireplace opening. You're scurrying around like a squirrel in there. Go to hell, I screamed and used all my strength to push past the obstacle in my way. Whatever it was crumbled from the force and fell down the chimney. Then my hand slipped and I fell too. I landed hard on the andiron. I screamed in agony as waves of pain radiated from my ribs. Once I regained my bearing, I looked up and expected a shotgun to be pointed at my head. Instead, the Remberts were crouching beside me. And they were crying. Then I saw what had fallen from the chimney. My obstacle. It wasn't a grate or metal bars. It was a skeleton that had been trapped. I had jostled the bones loose from their position on the jutting stones of the fireplace, setting it off balance to fall below. The Remberts were picking up the remains, caressing them and watching as their tears dropped on the old bones. "Madeline," Shay whispered. "She was here the whole time." Preston picked up a skull and stared into its hollow eye cavities. "My sweet Madeline. She must have gotten stuck in the chimney." The shotgun fell from his grasp and he collapsed into a weeping pile of sorrow. "Madeline. My sweet baby girl. I'm so sorry. I never looked in the chimney. I never looked after all these years." The ploy to get all their friends to their mansion. Their insane idea that one of their friends killed their daughter. Their murder spree of killing the people they said they loved. The murder of my father. It was all for nothing. Madeline had been here the whole time. This understanding lit a fire of rage into my core. While the couple wept over the bones of their missing daughter, I used this newfound anger to begin my ascent again. 5 feet. 6 feet. 7 feet. I used leverage and what remained of my strength to hoist my body up the tall chimney and toward the moonlight. I was escaping the trap that the Remberts had set. A web of deceit that my father and I had fallen into. I rose, higher and higher, seeking the triumph of an escape like a rat finding the exit of a maze. My palms fell flat against the top of the chimney and I heaved my body out of the house and into the cool night's air. I was free. "I love you," a whisper echoed from the belly of the chimney. "And I love you," added another. Then came 2 gunshots and I knew the Remberts were dead. Conquering my way down to the ground took some time, but I was aided with a large trellis covered in vines. I sprinted down the driveway, then down the road, until I found the nearest mailbox. From there I ran to a neighbor's home and pounded on the door. All of this was a blur to me and I only know about it from what the neighbors said in their police report. They only called the police because every question they asked me was answered by uncontrollable screaming. The sun came up and I found myself back in the driveway of the Remberts. I sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a thick blanket to help with the shock. A dozen police cars were scattered around the circle drive. I was questioned, then examined for injuries, then questioned again. I watched as a team of professionals used commercial-grade equipment to cut through the steel behind the front door to gain entrance. A SWAT team barged in once the door was opened. They found the scene as I described. Then they began to collect evidence. Crime scene investigators poured into the house and commenced a full investigation. I sat on the back of the ambulance and waited for them to bring out the body of my father. I was going with him to the morgue. The thought occurred to me that I had to bury both parents within 12 months of each other. I could barely contain my despair. Then I overheard a pair of the crime scene investigators. They were holding boxes of evidence. Documents, photos, hard drives, all from the house. "Excuse me," I said and barged into their conversation. "What did you say?" The woman frowned at me. I told my colleague that I carried out a cursory inspection of the bones. Anyone in our field knows that the bones in the fireplace do not belong to a 2-year-old child. She fished out a photo from her box. "This is Madeline Rembert. She was only 2 years old when she disappeared." I took the photo. The woman shook her head. The bones in the fireplace belonged to a man, probably in his late teens. Possibly someone who was hired to clean the chimney decades ago, or it was someone hired to repair part of the chimney. Maybe someone who was an itinerant worker whose disappearance went unreported. Whoever it was got stuck and died. The bones are clearly too large to belong to a 2-year-old. Her words seemed muted to me. I heard them, but I didn't understand them. All my focus was on the photograph of Madeline. She was in a cute little blue dress with a bow in her hair. Her legs dangled from the chair she sat on. The same kind of chair that was at the table in the Remberts' dining hall. She wore no shoes and had a wide smile on her face. She also had a heart-shaped birthmark on her left ankle.